I never expected that my son's birthday, his own special day, would be the moment I realized just how far it'd been pushed out of his life. The living room was full of people and noise and warmth. All the things that should have made the day feel like a celebration. Laughter bounced off the walls. Kids ran around in socks on the hardwood floors. And someone was already slicing into the cake before the candles were even blown out. It was all so perfectly choreographed, so full of life and joy. And yet I stood there, invisible. I was holding a neatly wrapped gift in blue paper with a red ribbon, standing awkwardly by the door. And not a single person turned to greet me. No one offered to take the gift from my hands. No one asked if I had eaten. No one even acknowledged that I was there. It was Jason's birthday. My own son. And I couldn't even find him in the crowd. That struck me first. He wasn't sitting at the table. Not with the kids. Not with the adults. I scanned the room again. But his small face wasn't anywhere. I asked Lily, his wife, my daughter-in-law, if she'd seen him. And she smiled a little too quickly. A little too tightly. And said maybe he was off playing somewhere. But Jason was turning 13. He wasn't a toddler anymore. He didn't just run off during his own party. Not without a reason. I tried to brush off the unease. But it settled into me like cold water soaking through fabric. I moved through the house quietly, slipping past groups of people who didn't seem to notice me. I checked the kitchen empty. The bathroom, nothing. I stepped out to the backyard, where Jason had always loved to play, especially during parties. But the swing was still. The grass was too neat. The kind of silence that doesn't belong on a birthday afternoon lingered in the air. Something wasn't right. And I could feel it deep in my bones. The noise from the party grew fainter as I moved upstairs. Each step felt heavier than the last. Like my body already knew what my mind didn't want to face. I reached the top landing and paused outside Jason's bedroom. The door was slightly ajar. No balloons. No laughter. Just a sliver of quiet and the faint sound of nothing at all. I pushed the door open gently. He was sitting on the floor in the corner of the room. Knees pulled up to his chest. Arms wrapped tightly around them. Back pressed against the bookshelf. He wasn't wearing the outfit I'd bought him. He wasn't dressed for a party. At all. His hair was still messy from sleep. And his eyes were fixed on the floor like he was trying to disappear into it. I walked in slowly and sat down beside him. The carpet was soft beneath me. But the moment was sharp, brittle. Something you couldn't relax into. I reached out, resting a hand gently on his arm, and asked why he wasn't downstairs. Everyone was waiting, I said, trying to keep my tone light, as if I hadn't noticed what was so painfully obvious. He didn't answer at first. He just stared at his knees. When he finally spoke, his voice was small and careful, like every word had been chosen and rehearsed. "I didn't think you were coming," he said. "I didn't invite you." For a moment, I just blinked. I thought maybe I'd misheard him. I forced a small laugh and asked what he meant. He looked up then, slowly, and the look in his eyes made my stomach turn. Not because he was angry, but because he wasn't. There was no heat behind his words. Just this distant, resigned kind of sadness. "Dad said, it might be better if you didn't come. He said it'd be awkward." That was the moment. Something inside me cracked. I felt it physically, like the sharp edge of glass behind the ribs. My breath caught. My ex-husband. The man who had promised me we would always raise Jason together, even after the divorce. The man who had made mistake after mistake and begged for understanding. He had made the decision to leave me out. And worse, he had dragged our son into it. I stood up too quickly. suddenly aware of how hot my face was, how hard my heart was beating. I turned toward the door, ready to leave, to disappear, before I said something I'd regret. But then I felt Jason's hand grab my wrist. His grip wasn't strong, but it was urgent, trembling slightly. "Don't go," he whispered. "There's something I need to tell you." His voice cracked just a little at the end, and I looked down at him. Really looked. And I saw something deeper than hurt. I saw confusion. I saw fear. And I saw love. Still there, in spite of everything. "What is it?" I asked. But he just shook his head. "Not yet," he said. "Please just stay." So I sat down again, beside him in that quiet room. The noise of the party muffled and far away. I didn't know what he was about to say. But in that moment, I understood one thing. Whatever was going on, whatever had been said or done behind closed doors, Jason was still my son. And he was hurting. He was hiding on his own birthday, in a house full of family who didn't even notice he was gone. And I was the only one who came looking for him. That meant something. Even if the rest of it no longer did. We sat there in silence for a while. Him leaning into me just enough to let me know he wanted me there. But not enough to say it out loud. I didn't push. I didn't ask anything else. The party noise downstairs kept floating up through the floorboards, cheering. Silverware clinking. A burst of music. Then more laughter. None of it felt real anymore. Not after what Head said. I kept replaying his words in my head like a broken record. "Dad said it might be better if you didn't come." That wasn't just a careless remark. That was a decision. A boundary someone else drew on my behalf. Without asking. Without caring. And what did he mean? Awkward. Since when did a mother's presence at her own child's birthday become an inconvenience? Jason shifted next to me. He rested his head briefly against my shoulder, like he used to do when he was little. When He'd fall asleep in the car, and I'd carry him upstairs without ever waking him. I thought we had survived the storm, the custody battles, the back and forth weekends, the holiday splits. I thought we'd come out the other side intact. Maybe not whole, but intact. Now I wasn't so sure. I looked around his room. It still had the posters we picked out together 2 years ago. Still had the bookshelf I assembled the night before Christmas while he slept. On the desk was a crumpled party hat. Unopened. His phone was face down. A single balloon, probably strayed from the bunch, had floated up into the corner of the ceiling and bobbed there like it was trying to escape. I asked him gently if he wanted to go back down. Just for a few minutes. His eyes dropped again. He said he didn't feel like celebrating. I asked if something had happened. If someone said something to him. He was quiet for a long time before answering. Then, he said, "I didn't want them to pretend. Not around me. Not around you. It didn't feel right." I blinked. "Pretend what?" He shrugged. "That we're all okay." That sentence landed hard. And suddenly, I understood. This wasn't about cake or candles or who lit them. It was about the cracks in our family. The ones we'd all tried to paint over for years. And now those cracks were too wide. Jason saw through them. And he was tired of pretending they didn't exist. He told me he overheard Lily talking to his father the night before. They thought he was asleep in his room, but had come downstairs to grab a snack and heard them talking in the kitchen. They said the party was already too full. That my presence might make things complicated. His dad even joked that I might bring drama. That I'd find a way to make it about myself. Lily had laughed. Not cruelly. But she didn't defend me either. And that's when Jason decided he didn't want to go downstairs at all. Because he didn't want to smile in pictures that would be framed without me in them. He didn't want to open presents in front of people who didn't even bother asking where his mother was. And he didn't want to pretend everything was okay when it wasn't. He said. It didn't feel like my birthday anymore. That nearly broke me. I reached for his hand. Held it tighter than before. I told him how proud I was of him for recognizing what felt wrong and standing up for himself. Even if it meant hiding away. I told him it was okay to feel hurt. To feel conflicted. I told him that no matter what anyone else said or did, I would always show up for him. Always. Then he looked at me. And for the first time that day, he asked a question. Why did you and Dad stop talking? It hit me like a punch to the gut. Not because he didn't know, but because he did and still needed to hear it from me. I took a breath and answered honestly. I told him that sometimes, when two people grow apart, it doesn't happen all at once. It happens in quiet moments. Missed phone calls. Disagreements that never get resolved. And eventually, those moments pile up until the silence between them gets too loud to ignore. I didn't blame his father. Not out loud. I didn't have to. Jason was old enough now to understand that adults could love their children deeply while failing each other in ways that hurt everyone involved. He nodded. Slowly. Like he was processing something. Then he said, I feel like I don't belong in either world anymore. That sentence scared me more than anything else, Head said. It told me this wasn't just a bad birthday. This was deeper. This was him floating in between homes. In between versions of the truth. Not knowing where he was allowed to land. I pulled him into a hug and didn't let go. I told him he didn't have to choose sides. That he belonged in my world. In any world he wanted to be in. Because he was enough just as he was. I told him that no matter what his dad or Lily or anyone else thought, this wasn't about convenience or invitations. It was about family. Real family. And real family doesn't uninvite each other. Real family doesn't make a child feel like a guest in his own house. He didn't cry. But I felt the weight in his arms as he held me tighter. Downstairs. I heard someone call his name. Probably his father. Finally realizing the guest of honor was missing, Jason pulled away and looked toward the door. What do you want to do? I asked. He paused. Then he stood up, wiped his eyes, and said softly, I think it's time they hear the truth. And that's when I knew we were no longer hiding upstairs. We were about to walk straight into the middle of everything we'd been avoiding. We walked down the stairs slowly, Jason one step ahead of me. His hand still gripping mine like a lifeline. The party was still in full swing. Though now it felt more like background noise, people talking over one another. Someone shouting from the kitchen about refilling drinks. Kids chasing each other through the hallway with frosted fingers and crumpled napkins. The scent of warm food mixed with sugary icing clung in the air. But none of it felt comforting anymore. It felt like a distraction. A curtain drawn over something no one wanted to look at too closely. As soon as we stepped into view, the shift in energy was immediate. Heads turned. Conversations stuttered. The clinking of forks against plates slowed. Lily spotted us first. Her smile froze for just a second before she quickly recovered. Walking toward us with practiced warmth. There you are, she said to Jason. We were just about to sing. Everyone's waiting for you. Then she turned to me. Her voice carefully measured. I didn't realize you were still here. Jason spoke before I could. Mom was upstairs with me. I asked her to stay. The look on Lily's face didn't change. But her eyes flicked toward her husband, my ex, who was leaning against the kitchen counter with a drink in his hand. trying very hard not to appear startled. He straightened up, walked toward us, and offered a tight nod. "Hey," he said to Jason, like he was testing the waters. "Everything all right?" Jason looked at him, then at me, then back at his Prom7. "Father, I heard you last night." "Dad?" "In the kitchen. You said she shouldn't come." The silence that followed was loud enough to drown out the music, still playing in the background. People looked at each other, unsure whether to pretend they didn't hear or brace themselves for whatever was coming. Lily cleared her throat. "Jason, maybe we can talk about this later." "No," Jason said. Firmer now. "If everyone's going to act like nothing happened, I won't sit through another birthday, pretending this is normal." And just like that, the thread had been pulled, and the fabric of the day began to unravel. My ex stepped forward, voice low but sharp. "Jason, this isn't the time." Jason didn't back down. "When is the time?" "Then. When you don't think I am listening. When you decide who belongs in my life without asking me." His father opened his mouth, then closed it. I could see the calculation in his eyes, how to save face. How to explain. How to spin the moment into something manageable. But there was no managing this. The truth was out, and Jason wasn't going to swallow it back. I stayed silent. Not because I didn't want to speak, but because this wasn't my moment. This was Jason's. And he was standing taller than I'd ever seen him. One of the relatives, his aunt, maybe tried to cut the tension by suggesting we light the candles, but it was too late for that now. There were no more candles that could make this room warm again. Jason turned to Lily. "Why didn't you tell him I should be allowed to have my mom here?" She hesitated, taken off guard. I didn't know what to say. I thought it would just be easier. Easier. Jason repeated, like he was trying to taste the word. Make sense of it. For who? I could see Lily shrinking inward, reaching for justifications she didn't have. His father stepped in again. "It's complicated." "Okay. Your mom and I, there's history. Of things you don't understand?" Jason looked at him. Eyes clear. Voice steady. "Then help me understand. Because right now, it feels like you're trying to erase her." That landed harder than anything I could have said. My ex flinched slightly, caught off guard by how plainly Jason had called it out. "This isn't about erasing anyone," he muttered. "We just wanted to keep things peaceful." "Peaceful for who?" Jason asked again. The room was still. No one had an Epaulets answer. Jason turned toward me, his eyes searching mine, like he was checking to see if I still belonged to him in the way he needed me to. I nodded. Just once. It was enough. He looked back at the room, his birthday guests, his family, the people who claimed to love him while cutting him down the middle. Then he said something that made everyone stop breathing for a second. "If this is what family is, I don't want to celebrate with any of you until you learn how to respect both sides of me." Then he turned and walked out of the room. I followed. Not because I needed to rescue him, but because I knew what it took for him to say that. I knew how heavy those words were for a 13-year-old boy caught in the emotional crossfire of grown-ups who should have known better. We walked back upstairs. He didn't slam the door. He didn't cry. He just sat back down in that same corner. Legs crossed. Face calm but tired. I sat beside him again. "I am sorry you had to hear what you heard," I said. He shook his head. "I am not." It made things clearer. He looked out the window, then, his profile catching the last of the sunlight, and said quietly, "I don't need a perfect family. I just want a real one." I didn't have an answer, but I stayed. Because sometimes, showing up without an answer is more powerful than showing up with a speech. The hours passed slowly after that. We didn't go back downstairs. We didn't hear anyone come up. No one knocked. No one asked if Jason was all right. It was like we'd stepped into some parallel version of the house, same walls, same air, but entirely separate from whatever performance was still going on below. I could hear faint voices, clinks of dishes being rinsed in the sink, chairs dragging across the floor, but none of it reached us. None of it felt connected anymore. Jason eventually got up to grab a hoodie from the back of his chair and pulled it over his head. Not because it was cold, but because it was the kind of armor He'd learned to wear when things got too loud on the inside. He didn't cry. He didn't rant, but I could feel the weight in his every movement, like the act of just existing in this house had become a burden. I asked if he wanted to leave. Just the two of us. We could go get a burger, some ice cream, drive around for a while. He shook his head. No. That would just make it look like I ran away. Like I couldn't handle it. He wasn't wrong. And I hated that he was already thinking like that. Already worrying about appearances. Narratives. How things would be spun later. 13 years old. And already learning how to walk through emotional landmines. I stood up and stretched, trying to shake off the tightness in my chest. I told him I was proud of him. For standing up. For saying what needed to be said. He gave me a small nod, but his eyes were tired. Then, there was a knock. It was soft. Hesitant. The kind of knock that tells you the person on the other side is unsure if they should even be there. Jason didn't move. I walked to the door and opened it halfway. Lily stood there, holding a slice of birthday cake on a paper plate. The candle still standing in the middle, unlit. "I brought this up for him," she said, offering a small smile. Her voice was gentle. Too gentle. Like she was trying to cover a wound with a cotton ball. "Jason's not hungry," I replied. She looked past me into the room. But Jason was already turned toward the window again, pretending not to see her. She bit her bottom lip and stepped back a little. "I just wanted to say I didn't mean to make things worse." I nodded. But I didn't move aside to let her in. She stood there awkwardly for a few seconds longer, then lowered the plate. "He's a good kid," she added quietly. "I know," I said. Then she left. I shut the door and leaned against it. I was exhausted. Not just physically, but deep in my bones. That kind of tired you get when you've spent too long trying to hold up something that keeps collapsing anyway. Jason turned back toward me. "Was that her?" I nodded. "She brought you cake." He smirked slightly. Ironic. I sat back down. The silence stretched again. But it wasn't as heavy this time. It was companionable. Honest. Then, without warning, the door opened again this time, not with a knock. It was his father. He stepped into the room like he owned it. No apology. No hesitation. Just a kind of stiff formality. Like this was a business meeting. I stood up immediately. Instincts kicking in. Jason remained seated. "I think we need to talk," his father said. No greeting. No softness. I crossed my arms. "About what?" He looked at Jason. Then back at me. "About what happened downstairs." I told him. Jason already said everything that needed to be said. His father's jaw tightened. He took a slow breath. You always find a way to make these moments about you. Don't you? There it was. The thing that had been simmering under the surface finally bubbled over, and it was aimed straight at me. Jason turned sharply. Don't talk to her like that. His father ignored him. You show up. Uninvited. Then act shocked when people don't roll out the red carpet. This is my house. This was supposed to be a calm, simple day. I laughed. Bitter and tired. You mean a day where I don't exist? Where Jason has to lie about why his mom isn't at his own birthday. He took a step forward. You think this is easy for me? Balancing everything. Keeping things civil. Jason stood up. Dad. Stop. But he didn't. You think you're the only one who's hurt? You left. You walked away from this house. From this family. That stopped me. I walked away. I walked away. You mean after you cheated? After you turned every conversation into a war zone? After you convinced Jason I was overreacting every time I cried in the kitchen? Jason was standing between us now. His breathing was fast. His hands clenched. I asked both of you to stop, he said. Voice cracking. Neither of us moved. Then Jason screamed. Stop. It echoed through the room like a gunshot. And in that split second, we both froze. Time seemed to collapse. The boy who had spent all afternoon hiding was now the one standing tallest. And he was begging us not for attention. Not for validation, but for peace. His father took a slow step back. His eyes were glassy now. But he blinked fast. Hiding it. He turned and walked out without another word. The door clicked shut behind him. Jason sank onto the edge of his bed. His shoulders trembled. But he didn't cry. I sat beside him. Again. And this time, I didn't say anything. Because sometimes silence isn't a punishment. It's mercy. The rest of the house fell quiet after that. Not silent. Exactly. But muffled, like everyone was suddenly walking on eggshells. Unsure whether to talk, move, or just pretend none of it happened. Upstairs, Jason and I sat side by side on the edge of his bed. The late afternoon light now slipping in through the blinds in thin, tired lines. He hadn't said a word since yelling at both of us. He didn't need to. His silence said enough. And I didn't press him. Sometimes the best way to help someone process pain is simply to be still with them while they do it. After a while, he got up and walked over to his closet. He knelt down and started digging through the mess of sneakers, tangled cords, and old notebooks that had collected there, like forgotten time capsules. I watched him quietly. Unsure what he was looking for, he pulled out a shoebox, slid the lid off, and sat down cross-legged on the carpet with it in his lap. Inside was a stack of things. Some birthday cards, a plastic medal from elementary school field day, a couple of action figures missing limbs. But it was the thing at the bottom that made him pause. He held it carefully, like it might crumble an envelope. Yellowing a bit at the corners? With his name written across the front in handwriting, I immediately recognized it was mine. I blinked. I hadn't seen that envelope in years. Jason looked up. When did you write this? I reached over and took it from his hands gently. The memory came back in a rush. I wrote it the night we signed the final custody agreement. Jason had been asleep. I had tucked him in and then sat on the edge of my bed with this very piece of paper, pouring out everything I wanted him to know someday. That I loved him. That I wasn't leaving him. Even if I wasn't in the same house anymore. That none of this was his fault. But I never gave it to him. I was afraid he wouldn't understand. that he'd be too young. That maybe it would only confuse him more. So, I hid it, slipped it into the box of keepsakes I packed when I left. How it ended up in his closet, I had no idea. Jason opened the envelope slowly and unfolded the letter. His eyes scanned the first few lines. And I watched the muscles in his face shift confusion, giving way to something softer. Something deeper. He read in silence. Halfway through, his lips parted slightly, as if the words were unraveling something tight inside him. When he finished, he folded the letter again and held it in his lap. You meant all of that? I nodded. Every word. He exhaled. A slow, shaky breath that sounded like it had been stuck in his chest for years. I always thought you left because you were tired of Dad. That you just gave up. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. I was tired, I admitted. But not of him. Of the constant tension. Of the arguing. Of feeling like my presence was always a problem. But I never, ever gave up on you. Jason's eyes welled up. But he didn't look away. Why didn't you fight harder to stay in my life? That question cut deeper than anything else had said. And the truth was, I thought I had. I thought I was doing what was best, giving space. Not dragging him through court again. Trying to co-parent peacefully. Even when it hurt. But I could see now that silence had cost us. That trying not to make waves had let others control the current. I didn't know how to fight without making you choose sides. I said softly. Jason nodded like he understood. Even if he didn't agree. He reached back into the box and pulled out another envelope. This one was newer. It had no handwriting on it. Just a folded piece of paper inside. He handed it to me. I opened it and my stomach dropped. It was an email. Printed out. A message from Lily to my ex. Dated 3 months ago. The subject line read, "Her name isn't on the list." My hands trembled as I read, "I just think it'll be easier if we don't invite her. Jason doesn't need any unnecessary drama. We can keep it simple this year. Besides, she had her chance to be part of the family. She made her decision. Let's not ruin his day. Trust me. He'll be fine." It was like swallowing glass. "Where did you get this?" I asked. Jason looked away. Dad left his laptop open one night. I wasn't snooping. But the message popped up. I took a picture and printed it at school. I felt my throat tighten. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was intentional. They had coordinated it. They'd planned to cut me out of my son's birthday and hoped he wouldn't notice. Worse, they assumed he'd be fine with it. Do you think they were right? I asked him. My voice barely above a whisper. That you'd be fine. Jason shook his head. No. But they said things in ways that made me question myself. Like maybe wanting both, my parents made me selfish. Or immature. Or ungrateful. That hurt more than anything. That he had internalized their manipulation. That he thought he was wrong for wanting something as basic and human as both of his parents present on his birthday. You're allowed to want both. I said. You're allowed to love both. This isn't your fault. And it never was. He looked up. And for the first time that day, he smiled. Not a big smile. Just a flicker. But it was real. I think I knew that. I %. I just needed you to say it out loud. And I had. Finally, we sat there in that quiet room. The letter between us. The truth laid bare. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like we weren't just mother and son. We were a team. We were allies, in a story that had been rewritten without our permission. And now, we were ready to take the pen back. Jason kept the letter folded in his lap for a long time, running his thumb along the crease, like he was trying to memorize the weight of it. Outside the window, the sun was starting to dip, casting a warm amber glow across the carpet and the edge of his bed. He looked peaceful, but I knew better. He was thinking, turning things over in his head the way kids do when they're trying to stitch together pieces that don't quite fit. I could feel something shifting in him, something quiet but profound. Like he was starting to see the entire puzzle. Not just the pieces people handed him. He finally looked up. "Can I ask you something?" "A real question." "Always," I said. "Why did you stay with Dad so long? If things were bad, why didn't you leave sooner?" I took a breath and let it out slowly. That question had been living under my skin for years. I'd asked myself the same thing more times than I could count. I stayed because I thought love meant holding on no matter what. I stayed because we had you. And I was afraid that breaking up the family would hurt you more than staying in a broken one. And I stayed because for a while, I believed him every time he said head change. Jason's eyes didn't move. He didn't blink. He just listened. Quietly. Like he needed to hear it all. "Your dad wasn't always cruel," I said. "There were good years. Especially when you were little. He was funny. Warm. Generous. But over time, things changed. The warmth became mood swings. The jokes turned into jabs. And the generosity came with strings I didn't know how to untangle." I paused and stared at my hands. By the time I realized how deep it went, I was already too tired to fight. I wasn't just afraid of being alone. I was afraid of who I would be without him. I had forgotten that I was someone before him. Jason sat with that for a minute. Like he was letting the story fill in spaces he'd never had answers for. "Did he ever hit you?" "No. But he knew how to hurt me without ever laying a hand on me." Sometimes, silence can bruise more than fists. Sometimes, words, when spoken in just the right tone, can leave marks that don't show up on skin. He nodded slowly, as if something inside him clicked. "I've seen that side of him. But I thought it was just me." "It's not just you," I said. "And it's not your fault. None of this is your fault." He went quiet again. Then reached under his bed and pulled out another box. This one was smaller, less worn. He opened it and handed me a photo. It was from a few years ago, me, him, and his father on a beach somewhere. I had forgotten this picture even existed. We looked happy. Wind in our hair. Sand on our legs. Arms around each other like everything was whole. "That was the last time we took a picture together," he said. "I remember that day. We built a sandcastle that washed away 10 minutes later. But it was the only time I felt like we were a real family." I smiled, though it ached. "I remember that castle. You cried when the waves knocked it down. And your dad told you it was just sand. But I remember thinking maybe he didn't get it. Maybe he didn't understand that what you built wasn't just sand. It was safety. Something you thought would last." Jason looked up at me. "You did try, didn't you? Every day," I said. He leaned back, exhaling hard. "I think I always blamed you more. Because you left. And he stayed. And it felt like staying meant he cared more. That's what he wanted you to think." Jason shook his head. "More at himself than me. I see it now. The way he talks to me sometimes. The way he makes me feel small without even yelling. He acts like love is conditional. Like I have to earn it. And if I don't act the way he wants, I lose points or something. It was hard to hear that come from my child's mouth. But even harder knowing he was right. I am sorry I didn't protect you better, I said. I thought shielding you from the worst of it would be enough. I didn't realize he'd learn how to chip at you the way he chipped at me. Jason looked at me. And for the first time, I didn't see a boy. I saw a young man growing. Struggling. Trying to piece himself together from the shards we'd left behind. You did your best. Mom, he said. I tried. And now? Now I am ready to stop pretending. I am done playing nice for the sake of peace that never existed. I am ready to tell the truth. Even if it's messy. Even if it makes people uncomfortable. Because you deserve to be seen. And so do I. Jason stood up, took the photo back from my hands, and slid it into the box. Then he pulled out a notebook. It was one of those spiral-bound school ones, covered in doodles and half-erased writing. I've been writing stuff down, he said. Things I remember. Things that didn't feel right. I didn't know why. I just needed to. I reached for the notebook, flipped through a few pages, and felt my chest tighten. Small entries. One-liners. Observations. Dad told me I was being dramatic again. Mom called, and he didn't tell me until the next day. He said it'd ruin my future if I kept acting soft. Sometimes I feel like I am a mirror, and no one sees me unless I reflect what they want. I closed the notebook gently and handed it back to him. These are important, I said. I know, he replied. Outside, the last of the sunlight was fading. A new kind of quiet settled over us. One that wasn't full of fear or secrets. Just understanding. Jason looked at me again. Do you think it's too late to fix us? I shook my head. It's never too late. Not if we start now. Jason sat on the edge of his bed, the notebook still in his hands. He looked different now. Not older exactly, but steadier. Like something inside him had finally clicked into place. There was a certain clarity in his eyes. A stillness that only comes when you stop running from the truth and start standing in it. He flipped through a few more pages, pausing here and there. Sometimes smiling faintly at a scribbled note. Sometimes frowning at a memory that still hurt. Then he looked up. I want to tell him, he said. Tell who? Dad. I sat back slightly, unsure if I'd heard him right. Tell him what? That I know. That I heard what he said to Lily. That I saw the email. That I am not going to keep pretending he didn't hurt me. Jason's voice wasn't angry. It was calm. Measured. Intentional. I opened my mouth to speak, but closed it again. I could feel the urge to protect him, rising in my throat like instinct. Like a reflex, I couldn't turn off. But I caught myself. This wasn't about me anymore. This was his moment. His move. Are you sure? I asked. He nodded. Yeah. But I want you there. When I say it? I reached out and took his hand. Always. We stayed quiet for a few more minutes, just letting the weight of the decision settle around us. Then he stood, straightened his hoodie, and walked toward the door. His shoulders were squared, his head high. He wasn't a boy anymore, not in this moment. He was someone reclaiming something he'd lost. His voice. We walked downstairs together, each step deliberate. The house felt quieter than before. The guests had mostly gone. A few plates still littered the table. Empty cups lined the counter. The remains of a party that had ended without celebration. Lily was in the kitchen, packing away leftover cake. She looked up when she saw us and froze. My ex Jason's father was standing by the sliding door, drink in hand, eyes distant. Jason cleared his throat. "Dad?" He turned around, surprised to see us both there. "Yeah." Jason walked into the living room and stood near the fireplace, right in front of the framed photo of our family that still sat on the mantel, untouched. As if it still meant what it used to. "There's something I need to say," Jason said. His father nodded slowly, guarded. "Okay. What's up? I know you didn't want Mom here." Silence. Lily stopped moving. His father's eyes twitched, but he didn't respond. "I heard you. I read the email. I know it wasn't an accident that she wasn't invited." Jason's voice didn't shake. It didn't falter. "And I know you told her she made her choice when she left. That she wasn't part of this family anymore. That'd be better off without the confusion." His father stepped forward, holding up a hand like he could physically push the words back. "Jason." But Jason held up his own hand. "I am not finished." His father stopped, stunned. "You don't get to rewrite the story," Jason said. "You don't get to decide which parts of her I am allowed to keep. I am made of both of you. I am not a project to be controlled. I am a person, and I won't be part of a family that makes me choose between the two people who made me." His father looked genuinely speechless. Not angry. Just completely unprepared for this version of his son. "You said she left," Jason continued. "But she didn't leave me. She left you. And there's a difference. She never missed a call. She never forgot my birthday. She was just quieter about how much she showed up." Lily moved closer, her voice low. "Jason, we were just trying to do what was best for you. Then you should have asked me what I needed." He snapped, finally raising his voice. "You should have asked what I felt, instead of assuming what was convenient." I stepped forward then, just behind Jason, not to intervene, but to be there, to let him know he wasn't standing alone. His father let out a breath, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't know you felt this way. Because you never listened." Jason said, "You only ever talked." The weight of that hung in the room. Then Jason turned slightly, looking at me. "I don't want to hate him," he said softly. "I just want him to see me." And with that, he walked past his father and out onto the porch, the door clicking softly behind him. His father turned to me. For a second, he looked like he might defend himself, might try to justify it all. But then he dropped his eyes. "I didn't think it would matter this much to him," he muttered. "I did," I replied. I left him standing there, walked outside, and sat next to Jason on the porch swing. The night air was cool and quiet. The sky was turning deep blue, stars just beginning to show. "You did good in there," I said. Jason nodded slowly. "I think I just needed to say it." "How do you feel now?" "Tired, but lighter." We sat there in silence, the kind that wasn't heavy anymore. The kind that came after truth. The kind that allowed healing to sneak in slowly, without asking for permission. Then Jason said something that surprised me. "Do you think he'll ever really get it?" I looked up at the stars, exhaled. Maybe. Maybe not. But now he doesn't have a choice but to face it. Jason leaned against my shoulder. "Then that's enough for me." And in that moment, it felt like something had shifted, not just in him, not just between us, But in the whole story, like for the first time, we weren't reacting. We were writing our own chapter. The next morning, the house was quieter than I'd ever heard it. Not just in sound, but in energy. The usual kitchen hum was gone. No coffee brewing. No low conversation. No idle shuffling of cereal bowls. It was like the whole place was holding its breath, waiting to see who would make the next move. Jason came downstairs first. He didn't say much, just a soft good morning and a glance toward the kitchen, where the faint sound of dishes being moved echoed like a distant signal. He sat at the table, arms folded, looking both nervous and steady, like someone bracing for a wave but determined not to let it knock him over. I sat down beside him, and a few minutes later, his father appeared. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept at all. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair uncombed, but it wasn't the physical tiredness that stood out. It was the look in his eyes. Something between guilt and defensiveness. Like he wasn't sure whether he should explain or just apologize. He didn't sit. He leaned against the counter and looked at Jason. "I've been thinking about what you said last night." Jason didn't answer. His father continued. "I didn't handle things well. I know that. I thought I was doing what made sense at the time. But maybe I wasn't thinking about how it would make you feel. Or her." Still, Jason said nothing. I just wanted the day to go smoothly. No drama. No awkwardness. And maybe I crossed a line. Maybe more than one. I watched Jason's face closely. He wasn't impressed by the words. But he wasn't shutting down either. He was listening. Measuring. Then Jason finally spoke. "You didn't just cross a line. You erased one." That landed hard. "You didn't ask me what I wanted. You told me what made sense for you. For Lily. But not once did you think about how I'd feel not seeing my mom on my birthday." His father's mouth opened, then closed again. "You made me think she didn't care." Jason continued. "You made me feel like wanting her around was selfish. Like I was betraying you. And I believed you. For years. I believed that she left because she was weak. That she didn't fight. That she didn't love me enough to stay." He looked at me then, and I hated myself for believing it. I reached for his hand under the table and gave it a squeeze. His father took a step forward. "I never wanted to make you think that." I was angry. I was hurt. I guess I didn't know how to handle it. "That's not good enough," Jason said sharply. "That's not an excuse. You're the adult. You're supposed to be better at this than me." Lily walked in at that moment, holding a mug of coffee. She froze when she saw us all gathered there. Sensing the storm. "Maybe this isn't the right moment," she offered. Jason turned to her. "You helped him keep her out. Don't act like you didn't." Lily swallowed, looking suddenly very small in her oversized sweater. "I didn't think Shed want to come." "Your dad said." "You didn't ask her," Jason snapped. "You just assumed. And I am done with assumptions." His voice cracked on that last word, and the silence that followed felt final. Like something had broken that couldn't be glued back together again. His father ran a hand over his face. "I am sorry." "Okay. I messed up. I see that now." Jason stood up. "I believe you're sorry. But I don't think you've changed." That silence again, this time heavier. Charged. "You still want things your way. You still care more about looking calm than being honest. And you still don't think I see through it." He looked back at me. "We're going to Mom's." My heart stilled for a moment. I hadn't expected that. Not now. Not like this. Jason, I started. He shook his head. No. I am not asking. I need space. From all of this. From pretending we're okay when we're not. His father looked stunned. So did Lily. You can't just walk out, his father said. Jason met his eyes. Isn't that what you told Mom she did? I stood up, reached for Jason's backpack, still lying by the stairs, and handed it to him. Are you sure about this? I asked. Softly. Yes. I've never been more sure. Lily's voice broke in. But what about school? What about your room? Well, figure it out, Jason said. His father looked at me then. Something hard and hollow in his gaze. So, you're just gonna take him? I didn't flinch. I am not taking him. Tez, choosing. For the first time in a long time. He's choosing what's right for him. And with that, Jason opened the door. I followed. The morning air was cold and sharp, but it felt real. Honest. A little painful. Maybe. But clean. We didn't say much on the drive. Jason looked out the window, his hand resting on the notebook Head brought with him. He didn't look scared. He looked free. When we pulled into the driveway of my apartment, he exhaled like Head been holding something in for too long. I am sorry I yelled at you last night, he said. Don't be, I told him. You said what needed to be said. He nodded. Do you think this is forever? He asked after a moment. Me living here. I smiled gently. Let's not worry about forever. Let's just start with right now. He stepped out of the car, looked up at my building, and said quietly, right now feels like enough. The apartment felt smaller than I remembered. Maybe. It was just the contrast after walking out of a big house filled with tension and noise. This quiet space of mine felt like a whisper. Jason stood in the doorway for a few seconds, just looking around. I tried to see the place through his eyes. The plain beige walls, the tiny kitchen, the couch with the frayed edges and the TV that sometimes flickered when you turned it on. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't the house he was used to. But it was honest. It was mine. He stepped in without a word and dropped his backpack near the door. I closed it gently behind us. There was no grand welcome. No speech. Just the kind of silence that comes when everything has already been said. I walked to the kitchen and started a pot of tea. It was automatic. Something to do with my hands. Something to ground me. Jason sat on the couch, pulled his knees up, and stared at the ceiling like he was trying to read meaning in the patterns of the plaster. The weight of the morning hadn't lifted. It had just shifted. And now it settled between us like fog, soft but impossible to ignore. I handed him a mug of tea. And he took it without looking at me and held it in both hands like it was something fragile. Thanks, he mumbled. I sat down beside him, careful not to crowd his space. You, okay? He nodded. But not convincingly. I don't know what to feel. He finally said, that's okay. You don't have to know yet. He took a sip and winced a little at the heat. Then he set the mug down and leaned back, his eyes glassy. I didn't think it would be this hard. Leaving. Yeah. I thought I'd feel proud. Strong. But now I just feel sad. I reached over and touched his shoulder. That's normal. Speaking the truth costs something. And sometimes, it costs peace. At least at first. He blinked a few times and looked down at his hands. I thought he'd try to stop me. I kind of hoped he would. Not to win. But just to know he cared. He does care, I said quietly. But not the way you needed him to. Jason didn't reply right away. He stared straight ahead. And I could see the exhaustion in the curve of his spine. The slump in his shoulders. This wasn't just physical fatigue. This was grief. Grief for what should have been, for what still wasn't, for what might never be. Do you think he hates me now? No. I think he's afraid of losing control. And I think you standing up for yourself forced him to look at things he's spent years avoiding. He took a deep breath. Held it. Then let it go in one long, slow exhale. I hate that I still love him. That's not a bad thing. I told him. Love doesn't always make sense. It doesn't stop just because people disappoint us. But loving someone doesn't mean you have to let them hurt you. He leaned into me. Just a little. And I put my arm around his back, holding him like I used to when he was too young to understand anything except the safety of my arms. Do you think he'll call? Jason asked. Eventually. Will I answer? That's up to you. We sat there for a long time. Not talking. Just breathing. Just existing. Had made a choice that morning. And now the weight of that choice was settling into his chest like concrete. This was the part no one talks about: the fallout. The silence that follows the explosion. The ache that shows up when the adrenaline fades. After a while. He stood up and walked to the window. It overlooked the parking lot and the tops of some trees that had started changing color. The world looked calm. Normal. Indifferent. Like it had no idea our lives had cracked wide open hours earlier. Jason said, I thought being here would feel like escape. But it doesn't. What does it feel like? Like I am floating. Not drowning. But not grounded either. I walked over and stood beside him. That's how healing starts, I said. It's messy and uncertain. But it's movement. And sometimes, that's enough. He didn't reply. But he didn't pull away either. Later. We ordered pizza and watched a movie we'd seen a dozen times. He didn't laugh much. And I didn't expect him to. But he smiled once. During a scene he always used to quote. And I held on to that smile like a promise. That night, after Head gone to bed in the spare room, I stood at the kitchen sink, staring at the tea mug Head left behind. His fingerprints still fogged the side of the glass. That's when it hit me, not the noise. Not the conflict. But the quiet. The kind of quiet that comes when you realize your child is growing up through pain you never wanted him to carry. I had done my best. And still. He had been wounded. Not just by me. But by the whole broken system we'd forced him to live in Endovan. The silence. The blame. The invisible rules about who gets invited and who doesn't. I walked down the hall and peeked into the guest room. He was already asleep. Curled up. Under a blanket that didn't quite cover his feet. His face looked softer in sleep. Less guarded. More like the boy, I remembered. I whispered something I used to say when he was little. Knowing he couldn't hear it. But saying it anyway. You're safe. I've got you. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. That night, long after Jason had fallen asleep, I lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling of my bedroom, the hum of the refrigerator in the other room, the occasional passing car below the window, the faint ticking of the wall clock. Everything felt louder in the silence. My body was still, but my mind wasn't. It drifted, as it always did when everything else was finally quiet. But tonight, it didn't drift toward panic or anger or blame. It drifted toward memory. I thought about the first time I held Jason in my arms, the way his tiny hand gripped my finger like it had always belonged there. He was so small, so delicate. I remember whispering to him, just hours after he was born, promising I'd always protect him, that no matter what, he would never feel alone in this world. But life has a way of testing promises you make in hospital rooms. I remembered the arguments with his father, the ones Jason never saw, or I thought he didn't. I remembered the way we tiptoed around tension like it was furniture in a dark room, bumping into it over and over, pretending it wasn't there. I thought staying was protecting him. I thought leaving would break him. I didn't realize that watching love turn cold could fracture a child in ways no custody agreement could ever fix. There were moments I should have fought harder. Moments I should have spoken louder. There were also moments I should have walked away sooner, but I didn't. And I can't change that now. I remembered birthdays past the ones where Jason's eyes lit up at the sight of a homemade cake, where he ran to me first, before anyone else. I remembered reading to him at bedtime, the way he'd fall asleep with his head on my chest, trusting me completely. That trust had dimmed over the years. Not gone, but hidden, like a light under a blanket. It was still there, waiting, hoping. And then I thought about yesterday, about him sitting beside me with that letter in his lap, about the way his voice didn't shake when he told the truth, about the fire in his words when he looked at his father and finally said what he had held in for years. It broke something in me. But it also healed something else. He had found his voice. And maybe, just maybe, I was finding mine again too. I got up and walked to the small shelf in the corner of my room, the one I never really touched. At the back of it, behind some dusty books and half-burned candles, was a box. Inside were pieces of a life I once tried to build. Photos from the early days of marriage. Letters I never sent. Jason's hospital bracelet. His first tooth. Taped to a card. A drawing he made when he was 5 stick figures, holding hands under a sun with too many rays. I used to keep it in a frame. Now it sat folded. Forgotten. I pulled it out and stared at it. The stick figure with long hair was labeled Mommy. The one next to it just said me. No, Dad in that picture. Not even then. I sat on the floor, that paper in my hands, and let the tears come quiet. Steady. Not loud or dramatic. Just necessary. I wasn't crying for the pain anymore. I was crying for everything we'd survived. For all the versions of myself I had to become just to keep going. For the woman who stayed too long. For the mother who finally walked away. For the boy who still needed her anyway. And for the second chance we were finally giving each other. At some point, I lost track of time. I must have dozed off on the floor, because the next thing I knew, Jason was standing in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. "Why are you up?" he asked groggily. "Couldn't sleep," I admitted. He looked down at the paper in my lap. "I remember that drawing." "Do you?" "Yeah. I think I made it after you read me that story about the lion and the mouse. You said I was brave like the mouse." I smiled through my exhaustion. "You were." "Still am," he said, sitting beside me. He glanced at the box. "What else is in there?" I opened it and let him see. He pulled out one item at a time: photos, trinkets, old letters. He asked questions about some, laughed at others. For the first time in a long time, we weren't just mother and son. We were two people. slowly rediscovering each other through the artifacts of a shared life. You kept all this. Every piece. Even when I was mad at you. Especially then. He leaned his head against my shoulder. I am glad we left, he said softly. But part of me is scared too. Me too. What if it doesn't get better? I looked at him, carefully. Then we'll figure it out together. One day at a time. He nodded. One day at a time sounds okay. We sat like that until the sun started to rise, casting soft light across the floor and the open box of memories between us. The world outside was still uncertain. Our future still blurry. But inside that moment, everything felt clear. We had chosen each other again. And that was enough for now. The next week moved slowly. Like time itself was trying to learn how to breathe again. Jason and I settled into a quiet rhythm in the apartment. It wasn't perfect. Some mornings were heavier than others. Some nights, we didn't talk much. But there was an ease that hadn't existed before, a kind of honesty in the silence that felt like progress. He went back to school midweek. I offered to keep him home longer. But he said he needed the normalcy. Needed something that wasn't covered in emotional residue. He came home tired. Sometimes quiet. But he always sat beside me on the couch when he got in. Sometimes he'd talk about his day. Other times, he'd just rest his head on my shoulder. And that was enough. One evening, about 5 days in, we were washing dishes together when he asked me if I thought people could really change. I paused, hands submerged in soapy water. You mean like anyone? He nodded. Like Dad. I looked over at him. His voice wasn't angry. Just curious. Hesitant. I think people can change, I said. But they have to want to. And they have to understand what they've done before they can undo any part of it. He rinsed a plate slowly. I think he's trying. In his own way. Maybe he is. But you don't trust it. Do you? I turned the faucet off and wiped my hands on a towel. I want to. But trust is something that has to be rebuilt. Over time. And sometimes, with people like your father, it comes in flashes. You see a version of him that feels good. Honest. Better. But then it disappears. And that inconsistency, it's hard to build on. Jason set the last plate in the drying rack and turned to face me. He called me today. My heart paused. He did. Yeah. Just asked how I was doing. Said he missed me. That the house was too quiet without me. What did you say? I told him I missed parts of it. My room. The dog. The routine. But I didn't say I missed him. Because I didn't want to lie. That was brave. I said. I don't want to shut him out. Jason continued. I don't hate him. I just want him to stop pretending. I want him to own what he did. And I want him to respect that I made a choice. Even if it hurt him. He looked at me. Eyes steady. Do you think I should see him? I thought for a moment. If you feel ready, and if you're clear about your boundaries, I think it could be a good step. Not for him. For you? Jason nodded slowly. Maybe this weekend. Lunch or something? Only if you feel safe. I do. Now. Those words settled into my chest with a warmth I didn't expect. Not because they were loud or dramatic, but because they were honest. Simple. Real. That weekend, Jason met his father for lunch. I didn't go. That was their space to navigate. I waited at home, heart pounding the entire time. checking my phone every 5 minutes in case he needed an excuse to leave. But the message never came. When he walked back through the front door 2 hours later, he looked calm. I poured him a glass of water and asked how it went. He sat down at the table, took a sip, then shrugged. Better than I thought. Worse than I hoped. He was quiet for a moment, then added, he said sorry. Again. But this time, it felt different. Like he meant it. But he still doesn't understand everything. I don't think he sees how deep it went. How long it hurt. That might take time, I said. Jason nodded. I told him I needed space. That he'd come visit again when I was ready. Not on his schedule. Mine. How did he take that? Not great. But he didn't fight me. He just nodded. Said he understood. And do you believe him? Jason stared at his glass for a second. Then smiled. I don't know yet. But I believed myself when I said it. And that felt good. Later that evening, he helped me cook dinner. We played music. Danced awkwardly in the kitchen. And for the first time since all of this began, we laughed. Really laughed. The kind that starts in your chest and tumbles out before you can stop it. After dinner, we curled up on the couch and watched a movie. About halfway through, Jason turned to me and said, I don't know if things will ever go back to how they were. I looked at him carefully. Maybe they're not supposed to. Then what are we building now? Something new. I said. Something better. Something honest. He smiled. I like honest. Me too. That night. Before going to bed, he walked over and hugged me without saying a word. I just wrapped his arms around me tight and held on for a while. I didn't ask what it meant. I didn't need to. It was the kind of hug that said, thank you. That said, I see you. That said, I am coming back. And in that quiet moment, I realized this wasn't just a second chance for him. It was one for me too. A few weeks passed, the cold in the air started to ease. And the trees outside our apartment began budding again, quiet signs that the world was moving forward. Even if we were still catching up inside, there was a new rhythm to our days now. School, dinner, small talks, occasional silences that no longer felt like distance, but instead like peace. Space. Breathing room. Jason started sleeping better. I could tell because he didn't stay up scrolling through his phone or pacing the hallway anymore. And he didn't ask about going back to his dad's house either. But he didn't bring it up with resentment. It was like something had finally settled in him. Like he had made peace with the idea that love doesn't always mean presence, and absence doesn't always mean lack of love. Sometimes it just means boundaries. Necessary ones. One Saturday morning, I made pancakes. It had become our quiet ritual: wake up to the smell, wander out in socks and messy hair, and sit at the counter while I flipped batter and hummed old songs. He did exactly that morning. Halfway through breakfast, he said, You know, I've been thinking about next year. What about it? High school. It feels big. Like a new start. It is a new start. He pushed a blueberry around his plate with his fork. I don't want to start at carrying all this. I put the spatula down and turned toward him. What do you mean? I mean, I want to talk to Dad. Really talk. Not just a check-in. Not just surface stuff. I want to say everything. For real. And then decide where I stand. I nodded slowly. And what if he still doesn't hear you? Then at least he'll know I tried. I smiled. That sounds brave. He shrugged. I think I am tired of being quiet to keep everyone else comfortable. I sat down across from him. I'll support you either way, I said. Whatever comes out of that conversation, whether it brings you closer or gives you clarity to let go, I'll be here. He reached across the table and took my toweled hand. I know that now. A week later, he scheduled the talk. Not a dinner. Not a casual drive. A talk. In public. Neutral ground, a coffee shop near his school. He asked me to come. Not to speak. But to be nearby. Just in case. So I sat 2 tables away, pretending to read a book while I watched him sit across from his father. I couldn't hear the words. And I didn't want to. This was his. But I watched their faces. Their gestures. The way Jason leaned forward, talking with his hands. The way his father sat straighter than usual. More alert. I watched the pause when Jason finished saying something, and his father dropped his eyes, nodded, and reached across the table. They spoke for almost an hour. When it ended, Jason walked out first. He didn't look angry. He didn't look crushed. He looked steady. Like a tree that had bent in the wind for too long and had finally found its center again. We didn't talk about the details right away. He didn't need to. Instead, we went home and made popcorn, watched a documentary, and argued playfully about whether cats or dogs were smarter. It was ordinary. It was beautiful. Later that night, while brushing his teeth, Jason called out through the hallway. You were right, he said. About what? That sometimes people don't change. But that doesn't mean you can't. I paused at the doorway. Is that what happened? He shrugged. He listened. That's a start. But I think I am done, hoping Hell becomes someone he isn't. I am just going to meet him where he is and protect myself from the parts that still hurt. That's wise, I said. He grinned. Toothpaste foam at the corners of his mouth. I am a wise man now. After he went to bed, I stood at the kitchen sink again. Just like I had that first night. But this time, there was no fear sitting in my stomach. No ache in my throat. Just stillness. And a quiet sense of pride. We had walked through fire. Together. And we had come out carrying a different kind of scar, one that didn't hurt, but reminded us who we were. The next morning, Jason left a note on the fridge. Thanks for letting me choose. Thanks for not choosing for me. Underneath, had drawn 2 stick figures again. One was labeled me. The other, still Mom. It made me laugh. And cry. And smile all over again. We didn't fix everything. But we stopped, pretending. We started again. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like we weren't just surviving. We were living. It's strange how the most painful stories often end not with a crash, but with a whisper. Not with final words or dramatic exits, but with small moments, quiet shifts. The kind that don't make headlines but stay with you longer than the noise ever could. This wasn't a story of heroes or villains. It never was. It was a story of people. Flawed. Scared. Trying their best, sometimes failing. Sometimes hurting each other. Sometimes growing. It was a story about a boy caught between 2 versions of love. And a mother who had to relearn what showing up truly meant. Jason didn't fix everything overnight. Neither did I. His father didn't suddenly transform into a different man. There were still awkward phone calls. Still gaps in understanding. Still, parts of the past we'd never fully make sense of. But that's okay. Because healing doesn't mean erasing the scar. It means learning to live with it. It means letting it remind you where you've been and how far you've come. Some nights now. Jason sits by the window with his headphones on, nodding along to music I don't recognize. He'll glance over, smile at me, and say something like, "Hey Mom, remember when I used to think you were the bad guy?" And I'll smile back and say, "I remember." But what I also remember, what I'll never forget, is the moment he looked me in the eye and chose me again. Chose honesty over comfort, chose truth over silence. Chose to stop shrinking himself to fit someone else's version of peace. I used to think love was about sacrifice, about giving and giving, until you had nothing left to give. Now I think love is something else entirely. I think love is being willing to sit in the hard moments, to ask the hard questions, to stay when it's uncomfortable, and to leave when staying means disappearing. Jason taught me that. In the way he spoke up, in the way he stopped protecting everyone else's feelings at the cost of his own, in the way he let himself grieve what he thought family was supposed to be, and then allowed himself to start building what it could still become. I don't know what our future looks like. I don't have a 10-year plan. I don't know where Jason will want to live when he's 16, or what holidays will look like, or whether the awkwardness with his dad will ever truly dissolve. But I do know this. We're not pretending anymore. And that's a powerful place to begin. So, if you're listening to this, and you're somewhere in the middle of your own hard moment, if you're the mother who feels like she's losing her child, or the child who feels caught between people who love him but don't know how to show it, let me tell you something. I wish someone had told me. It's not too late. Not to be honest. Not to apologize. Not to choose again. Not to love with your eyes open this time. You don't need the perfect apology to start healing. You just need one honest sentence. One real moment. One decision to stop hiding. That's how we started again. In a quiet apartment. Over burnt pancakes. With a letter from the past. And a boy who said, "Still, Mom." The kind of love that survives isn't always loud. Sometimes, it just stays. It shows up. It says, "You're allowed to want more, and you're not wrong for needing it." So here we are. Not broken. Not perfect. Just real. And that finally feels like enough.